This is our second lesson in our series called Tribe, Find Your People. In our first lesson, we talked about becoming a mature person, and that in order to find your community, you would need to become mature. And just wanted to make a quick clarifier on that. Immaturity doesn't mean you're not worthy of a community. It just means that when we are not mature emotionally in the way that we handle conflict and those kinds of things, we won't actually stay in a community long enough to have real relationships. So last week we talked about how to become a mature person. This week we want to talk about the kinds of friends that we need to have in our lives. So today we're going to look at three kinds of friends that we need to make sure to the best of our ability that they're a part of our lives, or at least they're something that our friends do. So let's begin by reading a couple of verses that talk about friendships out of the book of Proverbs. A real friend sticks closer than a brother. Proverbs 18:24. And Proverbs 27:10. Never abandon a friend, either yours or your father's. So, those are some good guidelines to help us in how to comprehend and define friendships in our life. Now, what kinds of friends do we need to have, and what kind of friends do we need to be? So let's start with the friend who calls us up. And for that, we'll go to a guy named Samuel, and we're going to be pulling these friends from the life of a guy named David in the Bible. You can read his story in 1st and 2nd Samuel in the Old Testament if you'd like to do that. Samuel was a prophet, and he'd been around a long time, and he'd endured his own relationship breaks in his life, and betrayals, those kinds of things. One day, God comes to him and says, hey man, I don't know if God talked like that, but still. He came to Samuel and said, I want you to go to Jesse's house. I want you to anoint one of his sons as the next king of the nation of Israel. So Samuel goes. When he gets to Jesse's house, he starts meeting his sons, and the oldest son comes out, and apparently he was very good-looking, professional. I don't know what the word was, but whatever, he impressed Samuel. And Samuel thought to himself, well, this is the guy. And then God corrects Samuel, and this is what he says. Don't judge by his appearance or height, for I have rejected him. The Lord doesn't see things the way you see them. People judge by outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. The lesson Samuel learned that day was to look deeper, to look past what you can see on the outside, to look past the appearance, to look past the shortcomings of a person, and to look deeper. We need people in our lives who can do that, who can look past our dirt. It shouldn't surprise us that in a world filled with broken people, that we are broken, that our friends are broken. It's not hard to find what's wrong with people or the dirt in their lives. And, it's okay sometimes to deal with those things and to have conversations about them. But we don't need people continually pointing them out. Hey, there's dirt in your life. Well, obviously, I'm a sinner and I have dirt in my life. But we do need people who will come to us and point out the good things in our life, point out basically what God sees in us, and then invite us up to God's intention for our life. That's what I mean by calling someone up. And that's one of the reasons for community, for the church in particular. The writer of Hebrews put it this way. Let's think of ways to motivate one another to acts of love and good works. All of us are capable of so much more than we know. And we really need someone in our life to help call us up to that. So we need a friend who calls us up. We also need a friend who fills us up. So back to David's life. David had a very dear friend named Jonathan. I mean, they were friends from the moment they first met. Jonathan vowed his friendship to David soon after they met. They were close. They carried each other. And Jonathan had a big faith in God. And he shared that faith with David. I love this verse out of Samuel that kind of shows you a time in David's life when he had many that he was discouraged, where Jonathan poured into him. In 1 Samuel 23:16 it says, Jonathan went to find David and encouraged him to stay strong in his faith in God. We need people like that in our lives, people who pour into us. The Bible also says in Proverbs that as iron sharpens iron, so a friend sharpens a friend. We need to have people who pour into us, and we need to be people who pour into others. When I was young, our church did things called potlucks. And you've probably heard of them. Not a big deal, nothing fancy. But when I grew up in the 70s, America wasn't as wealthy as it is today. People ate pretty basic diets, nothing fancy. We got by, we were happy, but it wasn't as like it is today, where it's so easy to have a wide variety of foods. But Occasionally our church would have a potluck. What that meant was everyone would bring a dish. And then we would share the dishes. And, all week long we might have just eaten beans and potatoes. But on potluck night at the church, we all feasted like kings. And we were able to do that because we each shared what we had. Potlucks have taught me a lot about community, what community really is. Community is me sharing what I have with you and you sharing what you have with me. And as we share as a community of friends, that sharing provides for us a bounty of friendship, a bounty that we all partake in. So we need a friend who calls us up because there's so much more we can do. We need a friend who fills us up because there is so much that we need. And then sometimes we need a friend who calls us out. And for that we go to David's friend Nathan. Nathan had probably the worst job in the kingdom of Israel. His job is to tell the nation of Israel and the king, who during his tenure was David, things they did not want to hear. Now you probably know that David had a major foul up in his career as king of the nation of Israel. That I won't go into details, but real quick, he went into adultery, a whole bunch of deceit. The deceit ended in murder. The murder was covered up, and then there was a quick marriage that resulted as all of this. And when it was all done, after it all had been swept under the rug, David acted like nothing had ever happened. Well, in comes Nathan. And I don't know if you watch those reality TV shows, those fixer-upper type shows where they do the big reveal at the end, but that's kind of what I think of in the way that Nathan handled the situation. Nathan went to King David. He said, hey, and he told him a story. And the story is a real tearjerker. It was about a man who had a lamb, and he loved that lamb. It was the only lamb he had. And then there's a jerk in the story because all good stories have a good villain. And the jerk took away the man's lamb and killed it for a feast that he was having, and the man had no lamb, nothing left. David fell for it hook, line, and sinker. He got mad at the guy the jerk in the story, the villain. He condemned him to death right there and on the spot. And then at that moment, Nathan stops his story, and I imagine that he had a long bony finger. I have no reason to believe that. That's what I imagine. And that he pointed it at David, and he said, according to 2 Samuel 12:7, then Nathan said to David, you are that man. Sometimes it's hard to hear that we're not as perfect as we would like to think we are, that we're not as rational as we think we are, that we're not as right as we like to think we are. But we need people in our lives who love us, who understand us, who to some degree comprehend us, who are able to step into those moments when we are tearing our own lives apart and let us know. So we need people who can call us out. One little caveat I want to add on to the end of this study. It really doesn't fit anywhere in particular, but as we're talking about friends, it should be noted. There are sometimes people in our lives who don't need to be there. Now, I realize that Christians, we're supposed to be forgiving and loving and accepting, and I believe that and teach that from the bottom of my heart. But there are some people in our lives who are toxic to us. And so what we need to do in those situations is we should always forgive. We should address things and forgive them and be done with them. But there are many cases where we need to set boundaries. And we need to say, yes, this happened. We've hurt each other. It is totally forgiven. But going forward, these are the boundaries for our relationship. That is a healthy thing to do. That's not wrong for a Christian to have boundaries. It doesn't mean we stop accepting people. It doesn't mean we stop pouring into people who can't pour back into us. It just simply means that there are some people that being in relationship with them is not good for us, and we need to have boundaries. So today, those are the friends we need to have. I hope that you'll look at your own friendship circle or maybe your need for friends, and you'll think about people who can do those things and will do those things, not just for you, but with you. People you can do those things for as well. And you'll be on your way to finding your tribe.